from Griffith's Pegali to Sergio's The Good, The Bad and The Ugly, Coppola's Godfather to Ram Gopal Verma's Satya, Anurag Kashyap's Gangs of Wasseypur to Prashant Neel's KGF. Time changes, eras changes, but the genre stays the same. The way we pursue this genre can be subjective, but in one thing we all have to admit is that this genre gave us a lots of greatest filmmakers and actors of all time. And how can we even forget about the cultural impact? The cultural influence is unmatchable for any genre to spread around the globe. We have more than 11 genres which are so successful, earned a lot of money and brought us some masterpieces. But the gangster genre is the oldest one. And that's just one of the reasons why it's so successful. Successful, okay. Now I'm not gonna give you full-on history lessons to bore you and make you leave the video, but we have to know where it's all started from. But before getting into it, roll the intro. Okay, so it's all started from this guy, D.W. Griffith, the father of film. This milestone was not because of he was the creator, but his work reflected on his journey, the journey of where he came from. On October 31, 1912, world's first crime thriller gangster movie was released. But a part of a film that introduced a new genre, it was a technically revolutionary film. G.W. Bitzer, the only cinematographer of the film and a very trusted cameraman of Griffith, was being convinced by him to fade out the background when the three characters are walking towards the alley. But let's just avoid the technicalities and focus more on the changing era. Later on, during the Great Depression, the new crime thriller films were different from the morality tales of the era's crime genre. Their ethnic characters were pulling themselves by the bootstraps, were the new archetypal Americans. Well, the first film in this genre was Little Caesar, appearing in 1930, depicted the ups and downs of a street-level mobster. Well, I'm assuming you guys know about the story very well, because you know in these kind of videos I can't elaborate about a single movie, a single story, so that these kind of videos contain some very spoilers about these classics. So I'll suggest you to watch the movie first, then we can continue with the video. So, unlike the gangsters, the protagonist, Bandelo, lives and dies unrepentant of his crimes. So yeah, we can say that this is a little bit of inspiration of what happened at the end of Gangs of Wasseypur. However, the story is still being narrated. The movie was so successful that Hollywood made over 50 gangster movies over the following year. In 1932, people were getting fascinated by the usage of violence in these kind of movies. And this fascination was built after the release of Scarface. The ruthless and violent depiction of crime in this film became the symbolic representation of this genre. Because of the film depicted 43 murders, the MPPC Motion Pictures Production Code refuses to give its seal of approval. Well, the movie is still released with a few changes. They played a big game. Well, the 1931 gangster flick, The Public Enemy, presented an all-American anti-hero. Well, at that time, most of the gangster films were based on a character who treats his girlfriend so badly and stay loyal to his mother and his male associates. Just tell me how that works. Well, following the conventions of era, power dies at the end. However, the fact that he is killed by a rival gangster instead of police symbolized the deterioration of the law enforcement and the government. Warner Bros. Understood how controversial the ending was and included the following message at the end. The end of Tom Powers is the end of every hoodlum. The Public Enemy, it's not a man, it's not a character, it's a problem we must all face. In 1933, Legion of Decency and the International Associations of Chiefs of Police all pressured Hollywood to end the movie violence. To prevent the government censorship, the Motion Pictures Producers and Directors Association agreed to enforce its own production code, the Hays Code. The code's preamble stated, crime will be shown to be wrong, and the criminal life will be loathed, and the law will at all times prevail. Villains could not be the protagonist, and at the end, they had to be dead or in jail. Because gangster films were Hollywood's most profitable movies, the studios were faced with a dilemma. In the fear of losing its British audience, in 1935, Hollywood entirely deleted gangster characters from the movies for next several years. But what about us? What about
India?
Well, the gangster genre in our India has been a lot. Probably take it back to early 15s, the Navaketan films, which were noir, thriller, comedy hybrids. Not really gangster films, but you could see the influence of gangster films on them. They went hard-boiled, they were sweeter. Mostly, a lot of them starred Devanand, a couple of them starred Gurudutt, even Ashok Kumar. These were original Hindi crime films, but you could not really call them gangster films. This continues through the 16th and we reach 17th with Amitabh Bachchan. You start getting films which are based on real dons, and that's when they were at least acquiring the outline because they had real figures to base their characters on. And that's when you start getting gangster films in a sort. Even though it was way different from the kind of gangster films one had seen in Hollywood and other countries by then, it was only in 18th when these kind of films were actually taking shape in India. When you started getting not only the bona fide gangster characters but also the surroundings, which then started go through Arjun, Arth Satya. Okay, so the Arth Satya means half truth. It's not what I googled, it's my own consciousness saying. So yeah, give me a compliment in comment. And after a decade later, we got Satya. And everything took off from there. It was a before and after kind of a moment for the genre. There are a lot of reviews on that film lying on the internet, but the only fact, which I believe in, that was a single push to the gravity of madness, which we can see even now in KGF Chapter 2. After some moment, it seems films are getting more violent, incredibly violent. Then you can see actions are not cheesy and campy anymore, but more realistic and more gruesome. Now, with Anurag Kashyap, there is a whole generation is getting inspired by Tarantino and his films, and it's gone to another level after Gangs of Wasseypur. For me, it's so much to talk about that film. Maybe I'll make a particular video on that. All I want is your approval.
Okay.
Anyway, I think an important distinction in this Hindi film genre is also just how non-gruesome the old gangster films were. It was mostly quite campy in the mainstream, nothing very violent. Even though, in the 16s where color TV came in, it was still the same. Because by then, they were started to ape Bond films instead of colorful gangster films, even when that would make sense to them. It never got really violent until the 18s. For instance, Satya. Though the original model of Satya was the American gangster films, it really took a long time to float in India. And that was the influential change happened in our culture. Especially those Navaketan films, where you're talking about petty gangsters, you're not really talking about big time gangster. It's also somewhere sort of Gandhi non-violence influence. No offense, cause in India, it's really hard to show that much gore and violence during the nationalist and extremist movement. And after post-independent era, people are really concerned about violence. Showing crime in a way of bracing is still a taboo in our culture. No wonder, there is also a large amount of audience accepting this happening on a big screen or even with more violence on a mobile screen. Filmmakers like Anurag Kashyap influenced our youth to look forward to the world cinema. Movies like Pushpa, KGF, dominating over the Indian box office, grabbing the masses' attention in a non-destructive way. And that's the beauty of this genre. It knows how to consistently change its shape in this changing era. It will be known to be as classic, violent, offensive, massive, but it will surely never get old. Hello everyone, thanks for watching this video. I am noticing the duration of my videos are getting a little longer, but yeah, that's a path of evolution. If you want to contact me professionally, in case if you need some help in your creative field, all my social media handles are given below the description, check them out. And hey, I've got something for you. You shouldn't miss this. Yeah, check it out.
मेरा नाम है बुल्ला, रखता हूँ खुल्ला।